Welcome to the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Larry Casper. Today we're looking at legislative priorities in the PA House. But first, we're joined by Steve Ulrich, Managing Editor of Politics PA. Steve, welcome to our program.
Larry, thank you very much for having me today.
You filed a story about federal immigration officers obtaining information from PA driver licenses. Tell us what's going on there.
Last week, Democratic Senator Ron Wyden and 39 other Democratic lawmakers drafted a letter to like-minded governors of primarily blue states, including Pennsylvania and Governor Josh Shapiro, letting them know that driver's license information, driver's license data was being made available to U.S. immigration authorities through a little understood digital loophole. And the letter was basically informing Josh Shapiro that, yes, this is happening in Pennsylvania, and perhaps that he and other like-minded lawmakers might want to do something about it.
Is there an item on the license, Steve, a number, for example, that will trigger a search? Just how would it work, and what kind of information could be made known to federal immigration authorities?
Pretty much, Larry, driver's license data in Pennsylvania and other states is shared between federal, state, and local police through a nonprofit organization called NLETS, N-L-E-T-S. That group shares information with ICE, the Department of Homeland Security Investigations. They all have access to the system. And over the last year, they've accounted for nearly 900,000 queries against the database. So that information is out there and readily available to immigration and customs enforcement. So it's not necessarily one particular number, but it's all the information that can be poured through to help ICE with President Trump's mass deportation program.
Well, Steve, tell me more about that. In other words, try to give me an example of how this information from a driver's license could be used against the holder of that license.
Well, basically, it's an option for ICE to be able to make a determination that maybe someone just registered for a driver's license or was able to get maybe a permit, a learner's permit of some sort. It may be able to be traced back then using the driver's license number, a social security number, an address on the license that's able to trigger the fact that perhaps someone is in the country without a green card or something like that. And it allows the government then to quickly swoop in and plan for a deportation of a Pennsylvania citizen. And I think this is not necessarily what Governor Shapiro, PennDOT, the other governors around the country wanted to have their driver's license information readily available, public information available for this kind of use.
I understand 2 Pennsylvania Congress people are sounding the alarm on this issue. Steve, who are they?
There are a lot of people that are really getting involved right now. I know the Pennsylvania Latino Caucus has been very adamant about their stance and trying to make sure that the governor and the General Assembly makes a stand against this. It's something that really feels wrong when the day is over, Larry. And I think it really comes down to, is there anything that can be done? I heard from Governor Shapiro's office wanting to make sure that we understood at Politics PA that this is not just a Pennsylvania item. This is going on around the country. And there are 5 states in particular, including New York, Kentucky, Massachusetts, Illinois, and Minnesota, that have already stepped in and blocked ICE from accessing this data because state government employees weren't aware it was going on. So it now rests in, I guess, Governor Shapiro's lap to determine what the next course of action is going to be for the state.
Has he indicated any course of action at this point?
None that he's informed me or are reporting in this regard, just the fact that the letter was received from Senator Wyden. It was also Representative Madeleine Dean was also involved with making sure that the governor was aware of this. She was one of the signatories to the letter. No action so far, but we're going to be keeping a close eye on this to make sure that there is action taken, because I'm sure that the residents of the Commonwealth probably aren't comfortable with the idea of personal data being available like this to Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Try to make our viewers appreciate the connection of Pennsylvania State Police with other law enforcement. Just try to explain that there is indeed a network out there that's exchanging, and there's a free flow of information between agencies, isn't there?
Exactly. It's not only the Pennsylvania State Police. It's also City of Philadelphia, City of Pittsburgh, counties across the Commonwealth that are all in the information sharing business to make sure that if someone accused of a crime in Pennsylvania would flee to Massachusetts, that Massachusetts would be able to have the information readily available that the Pennsylvania State Police has. So in this situation, I think it was a little known digital loophole, if you will, that allowed immigration folks, perhaps in Massachusetts, to be able to spy on Pennsylvanians through what was typically an agreed to program to make sure that that kind of information was shared across the network.
Last question, Steve, and you touched on this earlier, but I want to make sure this is absolutely clear to our viewers. In this situation, are we talking about potential for this information to be released to ICE authorities, or do we know if it has in fact been documented that it actually happened?
It has been documented that it has actually happened. As I said, 39 Democratic lawmakers wrote a letter to Governor Shapiro and other states letting them know that this already has occurred, and it might be time to join other states like New York and to be able to put an end to it.
Thank you very much. Steve Ulrich, Managing Editor of Politics PA.
Thank you, Larry.
More of the PCN Capitol Preview after a short break. Welcome back. Our guests are Republican Representative Martina White and Democrat Representative Jared Solomon. Welcome to our program.
Thanks for having us.
Representative Solomon, let's start with you. Pennsylvania had its annual budget signed into law by Governor Shapiro just last week. It was 4 months overdue. What do you think of the final result?
I think it's a working people's budget. If you think about the folks that Martina and I represent in Northeast Philadelphia, they're people that need more take-home pay. Check, we did that with a partial match of the earned income tax credit. As people get that take-home pay, what else are they looking for? They're looking for a safe place, a quality place to place their kids in childcare. In Northeast Philly, as we've seen the proliferation of childcare, is one of the issues is that we need more workers to fill those jobs. So we have $25 million in the budget for recruitment and retention of childcare workers. That's going to help families.
Does that mean higher wages, Representative, as far as retention is concerned?
Yeah, it could be, and we certainly think about this. That's a great point. When you park your car in Harrisburg or in Philly, that parking attendant is likely making more than a child care worker in your child care center that is providing the critical cognitive development for our kids. We need to give these folks a raise. This moves the needle. And I would say lastly, the continued push by the governor and the legislature to increase adequacy funding for our schools. In Northeast Philly, some of my schools have literally crumbling infrastructure. That's no environment to work, to train the next generation of leaders in Northeast Philly and beyond. So we've really made a focus on working people throughout the Commonwealth. And I think we're going to really see the dividends of this budget for many years to come.
Representative White, how do you feel about the budget that was signed last week?
Well, I couldn't agree more with Jared that this is a working people's budget. This is certainly a Pennsylvania budget for the benefit of the people of our Commonwealth. And a few of the pieces that I really found to be beneficial include getting out of RGGI, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It would have been a 30% tax increase on people's electric bills. And so by avoiding that, we were able to help ensure that, again, working people have more resources in their wallets.
And that plan was about making power plants pay for their greenhouse gas emissions, wasn't it?
So that proposal would have resulted in additional energy costs for families, certainly. And then, there was some permitting reform to address some of the, issues that various industry has been facing in terms of being able to get through government red tape.
Well, why is that important for the future of business in Pennsylvania?
Sure, it's a great question. The reason it's so important is because, again, consumers are facing increased cost of goods, right? And manufacturers that are producing those goods have to pay for electric too. And when we have energy bills that are high, it raises costs. So by having a streamlined process where industry can track their permits and be able to evaluate whether or not they want to actually make large investments in our Commonwealth to create good paying jobs, they have to be able to make those decisions. And unfortunately, when things are unpredictable and they're waiting years in line trying to evaluate whether or not their permit is ever going to get approved, they can't make those decisions. So being able to get those things streamlined, tracked, as well as evaluated within a 30 to 60 day time frame, I think is going to be a tremendous benefit to the public as well as to job creators out there. But separately, I would say there was a $50 million a doubling of the economically disadvantaged schools benefit, which is a scholarship program that goes to the most needy students in the most crisis related schools. So the lowest 15% performing schools across this Commonwealth. Those kids that are trying to get access to a better quality education, they're going to have access to more scholarship dollars. And that's really exciting because I think families, one of their other costs in their household is trying to, afford a quality education that works best for their child.
Well, let's consider the most basic element of the budget, and that would be the spend figure, how much money was going to be spent. And the final figure was $50.1 billion. And how does that compare to what the governor wanted? And do you approve of that final figure, Representative Solomon?
Yeah, and I think we should get back to some of the issues that Martina brought up around energy.
We certainly will.
Yeah, let's loop back to that too. I think the spend number was a good start, but one of the missing components of this was mass transit. That would have, yes, driven the spend number up, but is of critical importance, right? In my district, every day I watch folks go to the 58, 59 bus. And they take that to go to the L, then maybe get regional rail. Those folks are the individuals that are helping to move people. They're moving goods throughout the whole Commonwealth. This is powering not just our region, but all 67 counties. And if you look at the percent that we spend of state dollars for mass transit, it is so incredibly small, and we have to fix this. We hope that we can figure out a way forward, possibly with getting legislation around skill games to really drive investment for mass transit. It's an opportunity to think about how we can completely reimagine mass transit throughout the Commonwealth.
Well, let's review the solution the governor put into place a few months ago, and I guess you could consider it a temporary one because it'll last 2 years. And does that take the heat off of legislators to take care of this now?
On which issue? On
transportation. And remember SEPTA's problem?
Yeah, I do remember SEPTA's problem. It still continues to be an issue. When I think we're in a moment,
they're in the news as we speak, even.
Exactly. And when we're in a moment of crisis, it's not just to fix something temporarily. And by the way, that's not what the governor called for. The governor was calling for transformational mass transit funding that would completely reimagine not just SEPTA, but all mass transit. By the way, this is not just a urban issue, right? Rabbit, for instance, which runs throughout rural PA. This is a way that we move people to power our whole Commonwealth, not just in urban centers, but in rural Pennsylvania. So no, we can't just think about this moment in time. We got to think broadly about how we're going to fix transit.
How about you, Representative White, on that same subject? What do you think? Sure.
Well, the governor did propose a $51.5 billion budget spend number, and obviously we wound up about $1.5 billion lower than that. And so I think that when we see the level of spending that's taking place across the Commonwealth, I think it's concerning to taxpayers because obviously they're struggling back home. And when we are exceeding the revenues that we're bringing in, it becomes very difficult for us to manage future budgets. With the budget that we did pass, like I said, we were able to preserve the $1.5 billion that the governor had considered spending, which is, I think, a positive thing. I think that in terms of what my colleague here was just explaining about transit, yes, obviously that is a concern also for me and our region. I think especially going into USA 250 next year and the celebrations, it's going to be critical to ensure that there is transit, which is why SEPTA had requested that the governor authorize them to use the capital dollars for operational expenditures so that they can last through that time period. But it is not a long-term solution. There have been many reforms within SEPTA to help navigate and address many of the concerns that were brought forward by the legislature, both Democrats and Republicans. And I think that the organization is doing its best to ensure safety, but also to ensure a stable operating system for the region. In terms of, again, working people, they need mass transit in order to get to work. It's just the reality of our area. But to Jared's point, in the rural communities, there are other, transit pieces that need to be funded as well. And that's to get people typically to their doctor's appointments and other ancillary things that they just absolutely need and aren't able to access transportation otherwise. So I would also just add to, when it comes to budgets, it's not easy when you have split government the way that we have today. We have a one seat in the House, it's a one seat difference, and then in the Senate, it's just a few seats. And then you have, the Senate is Republican, the governor is Democrat, and the House is led by the Democrats. So, we definitely have to work together. And I think that this budget is a byproduct of us all trying to find a path forward for Pennsylvania by working together.
Well, let's consider the increase to education funding. I understand that some school districts could get up to 7.5% extra funding. And how far can this money go in your district, Representative Solomon, to help with problems?
I think that the entry point is our school infrastructure. There's $100 million in the budget for school infrastructure. If you were to go to some of my schools in the district, in my district in Northeast Philadelphia, you would literally see crumbling infrastructure. These are schools that have been plagued by asbestos. So the learning environment, we're trying to provide kids with the absolute best in education. To make sure that they're reading on level. But how do you really do that when you don't have just the bare essentials? So I think this budget begins to do that. And if we continue to provide this investment, we're going to see kids beginning to read on level and really begin to achieve throughout the Commonwealth. So I think these are really critical investments.
And how far does it go to take care of what was pointed out in the court ruling a couple of years ago, which was that Pennsylvania's education funding was unconstitutional? Are we making progress in that respect, Representative White?
Sure. Every time the Commonwealth invests, we've been investing billions of dollars into public education over the course of the time that I've served in the legislature. So adding more dollars to ensure that our students in the public school system are successful is critical.
And accountability is an issue, too.
Well, it sure is. And, in Philadelphia and in other parts of our Commonwealth, we want to ensure that, there isn't waste, fraud, and abuse happening. We've seen some, reports from, various entities that are oversight entities come forward with some concerns, and we're working with school districts to address them. That also goes toward, again, with the budget in particular. One of the policies that we had been advocating for was ensuring that there isn't waste, fraud, and abuse in our Medicaid programs and SNAP benefits and things like that, our welfare benefit programs. And, by cross-checking our systems, such as, death certificates, if we actually do those simple things to ensure that dollars aren't being misallocated or actually ensuring that the people who need those funds the most are the ones that are actually receiving them. That can go towards saving a lot of dollars across the Commonwealth and add to the benefits that people are actually receiving.
We had a reporter on the other day who said changes are on the way for cyber charter schools according to this new budget. What could those changes be? What has to be addressed?
Cyber, I think we probably disagree on this, but
maybe the cuts.
That's
in
permitted.
Particular.
Go ahead.
I think maybe the cuts in particular.
I
but
think
reforms are okay.
Yeah,
accountability is always okay.
Cyber charters have been some of the lowest performers in the Commonwealth, and I think that actually under a prior Republican, Kurt Sonny, we were getting to a point where we were going to really get into critical reforms needed for cyber charters. That all changed with COVID because then all intermediate units needed a way to drive out education to their kids. But I think this budget gets us back on track, and we can use those dollars for critical needs in our public school system.
And I can just speak to a piece of the reforms that I think are really important. Ensuring that students who are online are actually seen on video. Because one of the problems in the past have been where there have been some welfare checks that had to take place at the home to see whether or not the child was physically okay. And those things, can happen where incidents occur where, the child has not come to the classroom or, gone online to be visually seen. And so making sure that those types of safeguards are in place for our students and families, I think is an important piece, and I'm proud to support those initiatives, yeah.
Now, given the hindsight we have at this point about this budget, again, it was 4 months late. So given what we've learned since then, what do you suppose was the legislative priority that slowed this budget down the most?
The one priority? I think there were a whole host of drivers that...
Let's start at the top.
Okay, so I think Martina mentioned, right, we're in a divided legislature.
Right.
So with that, I think the expectation is that we all find a way forward, but oftentimes the legislative priorities of Senate Republicans, House Democrats, and the governor just are going to clash, and it takes time to iron those out and come to the sweet spot of legislative wins that everyone can take back to their district. And I think at the end product, though, we see a lot of progress across our 67 counties.
Maybe I'm getting at something Representative White talked about before, which is this regional greenhouse gas initiative. That seemed to be a chip, if you will, in these budget negotiations. Do you suppose that slowed things down?
I would say, honestly, if you look back to the timeline of everything, in the very beginning of the session, a lot of the discussions were around skill games and transit. And then the moment that transit got kind of pushed, I don't want to say pushed to the side, but, where the SEPTA had asked for the dollars and then they actually got the capital funds shifted over to operations, that kind of alleviated the pressure of that issue not being able to necessarily
at least for
done
a couple years.
Correct, right, in the long term with this particular budget. Once that occurred, I would say that it became, well, what is going to be the makeup of this budget? What will help Pennsylvania win? And what can the legislatures take home to show that they have done their job well? And ultimately, you came to what you just described. You had Reggie. School choice was definitely on the table. There was a refundable tax credit that was being considered because, Lifeline scholarships, the voucher program was off the table on the Democrat side, but there was a potential for a refundable tax credit. And, when you're trying to find compromise, you look also to the past. What has the legislature been able to achieve? We got a child care tax credit in past session. So this year we were able to get the working families tax credit. So why not have a tax credit that helps K through 12 students that are trying to access the best quality education they could possibly get through a scholarship program? Also, what wasn't in this budget was the fact that there's an opt-in provision for federal tax credit for school students to get scholarship dollars, I think to the tune of $1,700 a student. That's not included, but those are dollars that are sitting out there that we should be able to access, but was not included in this budget. So there's a lot of intricacies when it comes to policy negotiations and budget expenditure negotiations in those rooms with the governor and the leaders of each of the caucuses. But overall, I would say we came to a really solid agreement that was able to get the votes in each of the chambers and the governor's signature. It's not easy to do, and unfortunately it took us longer, I think, than anyone had hoped.
I think it's all really about relationships. You know, Martina and I have a great working relationship, and we work on a lot of key legislative issues. And I think that the more members, what we're talking about SEPTA, the more members really get to go to the places where they can meet constituents that are out of their comfort zone. Really hear their stories and what makes them tick and key priorities, and really
Sounds like a town hall.
Well, no, I'm talking about legislators in other districts, so rural legislators coming to the city, people in the city going to other legislative districts that are not in their comfort zone, really get to experience other parts of Pennsylvania, and then building those relationships
To relate to what the other guy needs.
Exactly. We just don't do enough of that. And that would make the legislative process a lot better and more productive if we got back to the basics of building and sustaining those relationships. Just something about Reggie. Well, Reggie's now off the table.
Right.
So now we have to go back. Do we do Growing Greener 3? Do we
And what
change?
was that about? Just briefly. It's been a long time since we heard Growing Greener.
Well, we don't have a Growing Greener 3. I mean, it was.
But there was Growing Greener 1 and 2, but that was a long time ago, right?
That was during the Rendell administration.
Yeah.
Right, but
and refresh us on those goals.
So
anyway.
I would hope that a Growing Greener 3 would consider reconfiguring the energy portfolio standard, drawing on a whole mix of different energy sources. That would be critical to looking at a growing.
You have to get a percentage of your energy from this source and another percentage from another source.
Exactly.
That's what your energy portfolio is about.
That's exactly right. And I think this hopefully opens us up to considering those changes. This governor, I think, has been the energy governor. If you look at the wins, the Amazon win of a AI center, a data center, $20 billion investment. You look at the data centers around the country, the repurposing
$20
of
billion,
coal-fired.
is that statewide?
There are going to be a number of data centers.
That's what I thought.
That Amazon
and then maybe
is
some of those plans won't come through, is my understanding.
Sure.
There's merely proposals out there.
Well,
At Homer City, repurposing coal-fired power plants, I think you're seeing
And that's your dedicated energy source for the data center?
Right. So with this, exactly.
Because we know energy is a big deal for data centers.
And with all of the energy needs that we're going to need in Pennsylvania to meet the moment, we're going to also have the opportunity to expand and grow our workforce. So you saw in this budget investment in workforce development, we can bring a whole nother generation of students beginning in our middle and upper schools to begin to prepare these students with our community schools, our state and state-related institutions to fuel the next generation of workers here in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm. I could just speak to, U.S. Senator McCormick was out in Pittsburgh and brought $94 billion worth of investment, whether it be in the energy sector or the technology, AI, data centers. And those were commitments that those industry leaders had made to Pennsylvania of investing here, job growth, economic growth. But what was standing in the way was the unpredictable nature of whether or not Reggie was going to actually happen here and be implemented. It was in the courts. It was a whole thing being pursued. And so now that is completely off the table, as my colleague said, those entities are going to be more willing to make these large investments in Pennsylvania. And yes, we do need to ensure that there is enough energy from all different sources to ensure that we are growing the economy.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to give you a break for a minute. while we look at program notes for here on PCN. On the issues this week, animal cruelty laws will be the subject with Representative Christina Sappi. That's Wednesday at 8 p.m. Then right after that, lawmakers are debating whether to put a tax on so-called skill games. Senator Jean Yaw explains Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. A journalist roundtable, our guests will be Mark Levy from the Associated Press, Denise Clay from the Philadelphia Inquirer, and Lindsay Weber from The Morning Call. They'll be here Thursday at 7 p.m. Now, on to the history and culture side of programming. The America 250 celebration continues when PCN visits Pennsylvania's African American cemeteries. That's on Tuesday, today, at 8 p.m. Its history takes a tour of the Joseph Priestley House in Northumberland County. That's on Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. And on to sports, PIAA Cross Country Championships are coming your way on Friday. The action starts with the girls' single A finals at 7 p.m. Other divisions will follow late into the evening, so visit PCNTV.com for more scheduling details. And you can watch this show and all our public affairs programming free of charge by visiting PCNSelect.com. While you're there, you can download our streaming service, PCN Select. PCN is Everything Pennsylvania. We're a 501c3 nonprofit television network that relies on viewers like you. To make a donation, visit PCNTV.com. Just a couple more questions about the budget before we move on to individual legislative priorities. As I pointed out, the budget, as you know, it was 4 months late. Were you able to witness any problems caused by that within your district?
I think certainly the nonprofit sector and school districts were clamoring for us to get moving and pass the budget. I think that in the end...
How did they get by? Some counties were even considering loans from the Treasury,
exactly.
weren't they?
And I think that's what nonprofits did, and we're working, Rep. Doherty and I are working on a piece of legislation. I think it almost made it into one of the codes, which would make nonprofits and others whole. So if they took out loans, we would provide them to get reimbursed for those for the accrued interest on those loans. I think that would really help to make sure that these nonprofits are on level footing and did not lose any money during the budget stalemate.
Did you notice any problems that could be attributed to the late budget?
Sure. Local schools, particularly Catholic schools, did not receive their school books, so students were, not able to learn in the best way possible. There was also, as you just heard, the interest accumulating on loans, whether it was private loans to help fund local government or to help fund entire school districts, or even for these nonprofits. But also, it was really great to see Stacey Garrity, our state treasurer, step into a leadership role to help navigate some of that and offer up low interest loans to help make sure that these entities could continue and help make sure that those loans hopefully can get forgiven. I think that being able to ensure that government gets and state government gets our budget done on time needs to become a real factor moving forward. It is a requirement, and we should be able to get it done by June 30th deadline. It requires leadership, it requires negotiations and compromise, but we have to do it a lot earlier going into next year. Especially, I know it's a gubernatorial cycle, so we want to make sure that it gets done on time. There's no reason why it shouldn't.
Representative White, earlier in the program, I promised we would return to the subject of energy, and of course we did touch on that, especially in relation to these data centers that are supposed to be coming to Pennsylvania. So let's start at the beginning. How is the demand for electricity, the price of electricity, and anticipating this great need on the part of these data centers, if or when they come to Pennsylvania?
It's a great question. I think it's the concern for everyone, whether you're a consumer just at your household or even for manufacturers, right? We all need energy. We have to turn on the lights, right? So as demand continues to increase with data centers and just the advent of transforming into an for consumers, whether it be their vehicles or things like that, right? They're transitioning over to more electric using sources.
Plenty of devices in every home.
Yes, exactly.
Plenty.
Apparently the average is like 21 devices.
Hard to believe. I'm glad somebody
on
took
average,
the time to count.
That took the time to count, right?
I'm
I was
amazed
shocked
it's
by
more
it.
than 20.
I know. I was shocked by it, but there's all kinds of devices in our household that is now just pulling on the electric grid.
Right.
So with that said, as demand continues to rise and rise very quickly, because AI is new, right? ChatGPT is new, and all the other things that OpenAI, all of these things are new to us, and something that government is trying to react to quickly to address.
Even anticipate what's going to happen.
And anticipate future demand, right? One of the things that we included in this year's budget was a revision that allows us to actually see what the true projections are, where utilities and some others were trying to maybe double count some projections in order to potentially receive more dollars. And so we got concerned about that, obviously, and wanted to put provisions in there that require submitting proper information. So the forecasting measures that were put into effect are going to be very helpful for that. When we talk about, the demand on the grid, right? We need to have a reliable grid so that when we do go to turn on the lights, it actually comes on. But that requires energy supply into the system, and that means energy generation. The fastest way to produce the energy is going to, be with capitalizing on what the capacity is locally now through natural gas. It's a 3 to 7 year process to get a natural gas plant up and going. Nuclear power takes a lot longer. It's anywhere from 10 to 20 years, and the investments are a lot bigger. So, when you're an investor that has billions of dollars and you want to start investing in Pennsylvania, you're looking at, again, those processes that you have to go through to get approvals for all of these things. And if it takes a long time, it takes longer to generate the power that we need to supply to the people.
And given the law of supply and demand, I'm just going to ask the simple question, is my power bill going to go up as a result of these data centers requiring all this energy in Pennsylvania?
I don't think so, because of the investments, the key investments the governor continues to make. I mean, look at us versus our near peers in terms of job creation, economic opportunities of development. New York, New Jersey, Maryland, we're outpacing them all. Over 16,000 jobs created, and if you look at it, it almost seems like every day the governor is announcing a new economic development initiative, whether it's data centers and these investments, the AI investment that we were just talking about, Amazon's investment in the Commonwealth. These are game changers long term in Pennsylvania, because this gives us the opportunity to sit back and plan. We now know the qualifications that our kids will need to meet the moment here in Pennsylvania to fuel this new industry, and we can work to make sure that our schools are teaching to meet that moment.
I will just speak a little bit, because I know a lot of people are concerned that, data centers are this big bad thing, right? Out of concern that their energy bills are going to go up. But what is a data center? It's actually the public and people and industry using technology to advance, whether it be healthcare, whether it be manufacturing processes, whether it be to just learn more, right? Doing these searches. It requires energy. So, data centers are really just the facilitator of what we are demanding. It's a massive campus.
It's kind of a computer farm, isn't it? I'm trying to visualize it.
In a way, right. And so we're trying to basically get at the fact that these data centers are going to go somewhere in the United States, right? They're going to go somewhere. We want them to come to Pennsylvania because it does create jobs. And we have the energy right under our feet to supply these data centers with the energy that they do need to
meaning
ensure
natural gas?
Meaning natural gas, meaning nuclear power. There's some that have teamed up with, the 3 Mile Island.
There'll be a dedicated power source for Microsoft. Is that right?
So there are some. Yes,
that's
exactly.
And look, if Homer City's doing their thing out west, if we could have that moment in southeastern Pennsylvania, that would also explode energy production and also job creation. in our region where Martina and I are. So I think there's a lot of potential to grow. Remember, it's really AI that right now is propping up the entire economy. So I think what the governor is seeing long term is making sure that these centers locate right here is of critical importance right now in the history of PA.
And the history of our nation. It is a national security issue. If we're going to compete with China when it comes to the AI race, then we need to make sure that these data centers are viable, that we are supplying the right amount of energy for the public's consumption, but also for data centers.
And we can correct mistakes of the past, right? We always talk about shipping jobs off to China through various agreements like NAFTA. And this is our opportunity. And we in the U.S. typically don't do job training that well. We talk about, right, we're going to retrain and repurpose folks for a new industry, but then we sort of just don't do the hard work. I think what we're seeing now is here in Pennsylvania, us willing and ready to make the critical investments, not just to bring these data centers here, but to train the workers, not just that are here in Pennsylvania, but to say to Maryland and New York and New Jersey, we want you to come here to live, work, raise a family in Pennsylvania, and that means long-term growth for us here.
And the workforce, I mean, just in Northeast Philadelphia alone, we have some of the most elite and best trained workforce you could possibly get. Our union apprentice programs that train the workers for safety and for effective on-the-job work product is absolutely incredible, and the quality of workmanship is phenomenal. I just want to make sure that the world knows that the workforce is ready and willing to take action as quickly as possible.
And so to Martina's point, you know, we used to, Northeast Philadelphia, be the home of industrial might, not just for Northeast Philly, not just for Pennsylvania, but for the world. Diston Mills and Frankfurt Arsenal, et cetera. This could be that opportunity where we drive that type of job growth and economic investment, and it be a critical, and Northeast Philly is a critical part of that job growth and investment.
We have less than 10 minutes left in this segment, so let's turn our attention to some individual legislative things that you're working on. Representative Solomon, I know you're working on a bill that has to do with an open primary, but first, tell us briefly, what does it mean to have an open primary?
It's a semi-open primary, which is unlike California, which is anyone can vote for for any particular party. This sort of limits the scope. So
currently in PA, we can't.
No, right. So let's say you're an unaffiliated voter. You would come into the polling place and you would tell your judge of elections, I want to vote in the Democratic primary, I want to vote in the Republican primary. It's narrowly construed. Now, why does that matter? Well, because right now we're shutting out 1.4 million voters out of the primary system. So we take their money. We're glad to take their taxpayer money to prop up all of the stuff you see in polling places all across the Commonwealth. But what do they get in return? Zero. Absolutely nothing. They get no voice, no vote. It's time to let them vote and get their voice heard in Pennsylvania.
This group you allude to of unaffiliated voters, over 1 million Pennsylvanians.
Right.
Is this group getting bigger in Pennsylvania, and if so, why?
Yeah, I mean, they're not some mythical animal. You can touch them, you can see them, you can meet them. Independents are everywhere.
Are voters getting disillusioned with the major parties? I think that's what I'm getting
They're the fastest growing party in Pennsylvania. The fastest growing. They're 16%. And growing. And so if you look at the people who are deciding to register as independent, two main groups, young people, 18 to 24, and veterans. So someone who made a decision to serve our country and Commonwealth comes home and can't have a voice in our electoral system. That's just fundamentally unfair. It's just all kinds of wrong.
So then, just briefly then, how would you sum up the benefit for our democracy if we have an open primary?
So it's a benefit for us because we need to talk to more people. The independent voters become a jump ball. I get to say why they should vote and become part of the Democratic Party, vote for Democrats. Martina can say they should become part of the Republican Party or vote for Republicans in the primary and general election. Most importantly, though, it has a moderating influence on our electoral system. Now, elected officials or people running for office need to talk to more people. They need to talk to people who are not hunkered down with a particular political party.
I think we have time to get into one more issue. And Representative White, I understand that anti-Semitic incidents have risen in Pennsylvania, and you're working on a bill that would change the definition of anti-Semitism. So what is that definition now, and how should it be changed?
Yeah, so the reason that I put forward these types of policies, there's actually a package of bills that I worked with a colleague, Krista Marcel, on to ensure that especially in my district, I have a lot of Jewish families that live and work there, and there have been anti-Semitic incidents that have been occurring all across the city of Philadelphia over the past few years, and really, I mean, for a long time, but even more so in these past few years. And I felt compelled to work with our Jewish advocates, whether it be on college campuses or even here in Harrisburg, who have been focused on this issue, in particular, changing the definition of anti-Semitism to reflect what the National Jewish Federation has been advocating for. And it's really important to that community to ensure that people understand that they should not be condemned or harassed purely for their religious viewpoints. And one of the other pieces that was proposed was, a bill that makes it so that there's additional penalties for those types of harassments while being masked. I think that by ensuring that these provisions get into law, we're going to be able to help protect communities like our Jewish community and make sure that kids that are on campuses that are facing this type of a backlash, aren't being harassed or punished in ways that are just inappropriate.
As a lawmaker, you know that language is important, of course. So talk about how this definition stands now. It didn't even occur to me, actually, that there was some kind of legal definition of anti-Semitism. And how would you change it? What would the benefit of that be? Try to tell us in just the space of a couple minutes.
Yeah, so right now, Pennsylvania really doesn't have a formal definition. So by putting it into statute, we'll be able to affirm that this is clearly what anti-Semitism means. This is when you take action that goes against that law, you will have to go through what the penalties are associated with that, whether you're a school entity or even a government entity that is being discriminatory or not doing what is proper in accordance with the statute. But like I said, I think that by implementing these types of laws, we're going to be able to help ensure that the public understands where the government stands on these issues too. Where does the General Assembly stand when it comes to anti-Semitism? Where does the General Assembly stand when it comes to protecting the safety and welfare of communities that have been compromised by people who are bad actors, people who are trying to intentionally harass or punish people purely for their religious beliefs? That is not something that I will stand for, and that's why I'm trying to make change here in Pennsylvania and ensure that what our founding principles were, that we do have religious freedom here in Pennsylvania and that it is upheld.
Our guests have been Republican Representative Martina White and Democrat Representative Jared Solomon. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
PCN's Ellen Franz talked to Representative Arvind Venkat about grants for addiction recovery.
Welcome to our program. You've proposed legislation to create a contingency management support grant program within the state's Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs. What would this grant program do?
Well, thank you for having me. This legislation with Representative Flick would create a grant program from the Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs such that single county authorities that do have authority in this area of drug and alcohol programs could fund contingency management in partnership with treatment providers. And contingency management is a way to provide non-cash rewards for individuals who are in treatment programs and has been shown to be highly successful, especially in the area of cocaine and methamphetamine abuse.
What inspired you to propose this bill?
As always, the best ideas come from the community. I'm fortunate to be a physician, to have a lot of connections with the addiction medicine community, as well as toxicologists and emergency physicians and my constituents. And they've all flagged for me the importance of addressing stimulant use disorders and the evidence that exists for contingency management to be successful in addressing this substance use disorder.
Can you talk a little bit about what some of these non-cash rewards in the contingency management program would be?
So they might be gift cards, they could be an Uber voucher, they might be a small transportation voucher. They cannot be more than $750 over a 12-month period of time. And it is something that has been recognized by the federal government already in support of contingency management. And I think that we need to have it on a more widespread basis here in Pennsylvania.
What would somebody need to do to receive one of these potential gift cards?
Well, the legislation is very prescriptive. They would have to be participating in treatment. They would have to meet objective measures, for example, such as urine drug testing. And for those who are receiving the grant funds, contingency management cannot be the only thing they are doing. And individuals, after the short period of time where they're receiving contingency management support, would need to be continuing in treatment beyond that incentive phase.
Where would the funding for this grant program come from?
So there are actually funds available through the state opioid response funds from the federal government. And so we've specified that we would like to see funds allocated from there for this program. And if that is not available, then it could come from our general appropriations to the Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs through the state government.
You said you were co-sponsoring this with Representative Flick. How did he get involved?
So I've partnered with Representative Flick on a number of pieces of legislation related to substance use disorders. Our House Bill 269 passed nearly unanimously out of the state house related to the fentanyl crisis. And he has a wealth of experience related to single county authorities and in this substance use disorder space. So it's been great to partner with him in order to bring together bipartisan expertise on behalf of our constituents.
What have your colleagues in the House said about this bill?
I think there's been a real change in the House about how we address substance use disorders. When medication-assisted therapy became the standard of care for opioid use disorders, there was a lot of controversy saying, are we simply substituting one addiction for another? I think there's a more refined understanding of the neurochemical basis for addiction. We do not have anything like medication-assisted therapy for stimulant use disorders. That's where contingency management can help. And I was very gratified that the legislation passed out of committee on a 24-2 basis, showing that this is a bipartisan piece of legislation with bipartisan understanding of its importance.
Lastly, you mentioned the bill passing out of committee. What are its next steps?
So its next steps will be full House consideration, and then hopefully the state Senate will be interested in pushing it forward to the governor's desk.
Representative Arvind Venkat, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks to Ellen for that interview. Before we go, a reminder about On the Issues. First, we'll look at animal cruelty laws with Representative Christina Sappi. She's on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Then right after that, lawmakers are debating whether to put a tax on so-called skill games. Senator Jean Yaw explains that Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. That's it for the PCN Capitol Preview. I'm Larry Casper. Thanks for watching.